I never thought a bag of rock salt from Home Depot would turn me into the most hated man in the Pine Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. But here we are. My name is Jake Sullivan, and I moved to this cookie-cutter subdivision outside Naperville, Illinois, 3 years ago after my divorce. The house was affordable. The commute to my software engineering job in Chicago was manageable, and I figured a quiet suburban life would help me reset. What I did not account for was Brenda Morrison, the self-appointed queen of the HOA board, a woman whose entire existence seemed dedicated to making everyone else's life miserable. The winter of 2025 hit Illinois hard. By mid-December, we had already seen 2 major snowstorms, and the temperatures were hovering around 15 degrees Fahrenheit most days. My driveway, like everyone else's in the neighborhood, became a skating rink every night when the snow melted slightly during the day and refroze into treacherous black ice. I had been using regular rock salt from the hardware store. Nothing fancy, just the cheap stuff in the orange bag. My driveway and walkway stayed clear and safe. I would toss it down after shoveling, and within an hour the ice would be gone. Simple, effective, boring. That is when Brenda noticed. It was a Saturday morning in early January when I heard the knock on my door. I was still in my bathrobe, drinking coffee and watching the snow fall outside my kitchen window. When I opened the door, there stood Brenda Morrison in her puffy white coat, designer boots that were clearly not meant for actual winter weather, and that expression. You know the one. The tight-lipped smile that does not reach the eyes, the way her head tilts slightly like she is already preparing to correct you about something. "Jake," she said, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "Do you have a moment?" "Sure, Brenda. What's up?" She glanced past me into my house like she was trying to inventory my belongings. "I couldn't help but notice that your driveway is always completely clear. No ice, no slush, nothing. Meanwhile, the rest of us are struggling with these dangerous conditions. What's your secret?" I blinked. "My secret?" "Yes, your secret. What are you using? Some kind of special ice melt? A professional service?" "Just rock salt," I said. "From Home Depot." Her eyes narrowed. "Regular rock salt doesn't work that well. I've tried it. Everyone has tried it. Your driveway is pristine within an hour of application. There has to be something else." I genuinely did not know what to tell her. "I mean, I use a decent amount of it. Maybe I'm just using more than most people." "How much are you using?" This was getting weird. "I don't know, a couple of cups for the driveway, maybe. I just eyeball it." Brenda crossed her arms. "Jake, I'm going to be direct with you. As HOA president, I'm concerned about safety in our community. If you have access to a superior ice melting product, I think it's your responsibility to share that information with your neighbors. We've had 3 slip and fall incidents this month alone." "Brenda, I'm telling you, it's just regular salt." "Then you won't mind telling me the exact brand and where you purchased it?" I was starting to get annoyed. "It's the orange bag from Home Depot. Morton Safe Tea Salt. Costs like $6. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see she did not believe me. "Fine. If that's how you want to play this, Jake. But know that the HOA board will be discussing this at our next meeting." She turned and marched back down my driveway, nearly slipping on a patch of ice on the sidewalk that I had not salted yet. I closed the door and stood there, completely baffled. What had just happened? That evening, I got an email. It was from the Pine Ridge Estates HOA official account, and it was addressed to all residents. The subject line read, "Winter Safety Concerns and Community Responsibility." The email, clearly written by Brenda, went on for 3 paragraphs about how winter safety was everyone's responsibility, and how any resident who possessed knowledge or products that could improve community safety had a moral and contractual obligation to share that information. It did not name me specifically, but it was obvious what she was talking about. My phone rang 20 minutes later. It was my neighbor Tom, who lived 2 houses down. "Dude, is Brenda seriously having a meltdown about your ice melt?" he asked, laughing. "Apparently. That's insane. What are you using?" "Tom, I swear to God, it's just regular salt." "Yeah, but is there a technique or something? Because my driveway is a disaster and I'm using salt too." I sighed. "I don't know, man. I just put it down after I shovel. Maybe I use more than most people. Maybe my driveway gets better sun exposure. I honestly have no idea." "Well, whatever you're doing, it's working. Brenda's probably jealous that her driveway looks like an ice rink and yours looks like you pressure washed it." After I hung up with Tom, I started thinking. Brenda's driveway was directly across the street from mine, and he was right. It was always a mess. She would sprinkle this expensive-looking blue crystal ice melt stuff very sparingly, probably trying to make the bag last all winter, and it barely made a dent in the ice. Meanwhile, I was generous with my application because the stuff was cheap, and I figured better safe than sorry. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Wednesday. I was not planning to go. I never went to those things. They were usually just Brenda and her 2 cronies, Linda and Patricia, discussing paint colors and mailbox regulations. But on Tuesday night, I got another email, this time personally addressed to me. "Jake, your presence is requested at tomorrow's HOA meeting to discuss winter maintenance procedures and product recommendations. This is a mandatory attendance issue, as per Section 12.4 of the HOA bylaws." I looked up Section 12.4. It said that residents could be required to attend meetings if their property or actions were the subject of board discussion. Apparently, my ice melt was now official HOA business. The meeting was held in the community center, a drafty room with fluorescent lights and folding chairs that always smelled vaguely of mildew. When I arrived, about 15 people were there, which was a much bigger turnout than usual. Brenda sat at the front table with Linda and Patricia flanking her like bodyguards. "Thank you for coming, Jake," Brenda said as I walked in. Her tone was syrupy sweet, which meant she was about to make my life difficult. I took a seat in the back row. Tom gave me a supportive nod from across the room. Brenda called the meeting to order and went through the usual boring stuff, reading minutes from the last meeting, discussing the budget for spring landscaping, reminding everyone that trash cans needed to be stored out of sight. Then she got to the main event. "Now, for our primary discussion topic tonight, winter safety and ice management." She looked directly at me. "We've noticed that some residents seem to have superior ice melting results compared to others. Jake Sullivan, would you mind coming up and sharing with the community what products and methods you're using?" I stayed in my seat. "I already told you, Brenda. Regular rock salt from Home Depot." "Yes, but clearly there's more to it than that. Your results are exceptional. Almost professional grade." "I use a lot of it," I said, my patience wearing thin. "That's literally it. I'm not stingy with the application." A woman I did not know well, Nancy, raised her hand. "How much do you spend on salt per winter?" "I don't know, maybe $50. I go through a bag every couple of weeks." There was a collective gasp. Linda leaned over and whispered something to Brenda. Brenda cleared her throat. "That seems excessive. Most residents make a single bag last the entire season. And most residents have driveways covered in ice," I shot back. Tom actually laughed out loud at that. Brenda's face turned red. "Jake, I don't appreciate your tone. I'm trying to help the community here. If you have some kind of special formula or additive you're mixing with the salt, just tell us." "There is no special formula, Brenda." She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Fine. If you refuse to cooperate, then I'll figure it out myself." Meeting adjourned. People filed out, several of them giving me curious looks. Tom caught up with me in the parking lot. "Dude, she's obsessed," he said. "This is hilarious." "It's annoying," I corrected. "I just want to keep my driveway clear and be left alone." "Good luck with that. You know Brenda, she's like a dog with a bone." He was right. Over the next few days, I noticed Brenda walking past my house multiple times, always slowing down to stare at my driveway. Once, I caught her actually taking a picture of it with her phone. Another time, she was crouched down near the edge of my property, examining the salt crystals on the pavement. It was creepy. Then on Friday afternoon, she knocked on my door again. This time, she had a plastic container in her hands. "Jake, I'm willing to make you an offer," she said, skipping any pleasantries. "An offer? I want you to sell me your ice melt formula. Whatever it is you're using, I'll pay you for it. Name your price." I almost laughed. "Brenda, for the last time, it's just regular salt." "Stop lying to me," she snapped, her composure finally cracking. "I've tried everything. I've spent hundreds of dollars on premium ice melt products. Nothing works as well as whatever you're using. You're clearly adding something to it. A chemical accelerant, maybe. Or some kind of proprietary blend." An idea formed in my head. It was petty, maybe even a little mean, but I was so tired of her harassment that I did not care. "You know what, Brenda? You're right. There is a special formula." Her eyes lit up. "I knew it. But it's a secret. My grandfather taught it to me. He used to work for a chemical company, and he developed this mixture that's way more effective than anything you can buy in stores." This was completely made up. My grandfather had been a high school teacher, and he had never worked with chemicals in his life. But Brenda was eating it up. "I'll pay you $500 for the formula," she said immediately. $500. For rock salt. This was getting out of hand, but I was committed to the bit now. "I don't know, Brenda. It's a family secret. I'm not supposed to share it." $1,000. I pretended to think about it. "What if I just sold you the mixture already prepared? That way I'm not technically sharing the formula, but you still get the product." She nodded eagerly. "Yes, that works. How much?" "Well, regular rock salt costs about $6 for a 20-pound bag. Given that my formula is significantly more effective, I'd say $50 for a 20-pound bag is fair." Her eyes widened. $50? It's a premium product, Brenda. You said yourself it works better than anything you can buy in stores. Those fancy ice melt products cost $20 or $30 for a much smaller amount. I could see her doing the mental math, justifying the expense. "Fine. I'll take 2 bags to start." "Great. Give me a few days to prepare it. It's a delicate process." She left, and I immediately started laughing. I could not believe she had actually gone for it. But now I had a problem. I had just agreed to sell her regular rock salt for $50 a bag, and she thought it was some kind of magical formula. That weekend, I went to Home Depot and bought 4 bags of Morton Safe tea salt. At home, I emptied 2 bags into a large plastic storage bin I had in my garage. Then, because I wanted to make it look different from regular salt, I added some red food coloring. Just a few drops, enough to give the salt crystals a very faint pinkish tint. I mixed it thoroughly with a garden trowel, then transferred it back into the original bags, which I had carefully opened along the seams so I could reseal them with duct tape. The bags looked almost professional. The salt inside was clearly different from the bright white rock salt you normally see. It looked special. On Monday evening, Brenda came by to pick up her order. I brought the 2 bags out to her car. "Here you go," I said. 2 bags of the Sullivan special formula." She examined the bags. "Why is it pink?" That's part of the formula, I said. The color-changing compound helps indicate optimal spreading temperature. Pink means it's ready to activate. I was making this up as I went along, but it sounded scientific enough that she nodded approvingly. And I just spread it like regular ice melt. Exactly. But here's the key. You need to be generous with the application. Don't be stingy. The formula works best with full coverage. She handed me $100 bill. I'll let you know how it works. Over the next 2 days, Illinois got hit with another winter storm. 6 inches of fresh snow followed by sleet, followed by temperatures dropping to single digits. It was a mess. I salted my driveway with my regular Home Depot salt, and as usual, it worked fine. On Wednesday morning, I looked out my window and saw Brenda's driveway. It was completely clear, not a trace of ice or snow. The pink-tinted salt had worked exactly like regular salt, which is to say, it had worked perfectly because she had finally used enough of it. My phone rang an hour later. "Jake, it's incredible." Brenda's voice was practically ecstatic. "Your formula is amazing. My driveway has never looked this good. I need more. Can you prepare 4 more bags for me?" "Sure, Brenda, that'll be $200. "No problem, and Jake, I've been thinking. There are 38 homes in Pine Ridge Estates. If your formula works this well, we should make it available to the whole community. The HOA could buy it in bulk from you, and we'd distribute it to residents. What would you charge for, say, 40 bags? I did the math quickly. 40 bags at $6 each from Home Depot, plus a couple of bottles of food coloring, would cost me about $250 total. If I sold them at $50 each, that was $2,000. For a bulk order like that, I could do $45 per bag. That's $1,800 total. Deal. I'll arrange for the HOA to write you a check. Can you have them ready by next week?" "Absolutely." After I hung up, I sat down on my couch and stared at the wall. This had spiraled way beyond what I had intended. I had been joking around, trying to prove a point about Brenda's stubbornness. And now I was about to make $1,800 selling regular rock salt with food coloring to my HOA. The thing was, I was not technically committing fraud. I had never claimed the salt had any special properties beyond what regular salt could do. I had never said there were added chemicals or ingredients. Brenda had made all those assumptions herself. I had just given the product a fancy name and charged a premium price. That was called marketing, not fraud. Still, I felt a little guilty. But then, I remembered all the times Brenda had harassed me over nonsense, HOA violations, like the time she threatened to fine me because my mailbox was 2 inches too far to the left, or when she complained that my grass was a 1/4 inch taller than the HOA-approved maximum height. The guilt faded. I spent the next week preparing the order. I went to 3 different Home Depot locations so it would not look suspicious buying so much salt at once. I bought every bottle of red food coloring at the local grocery store. In my garage, I set up an assembly line, mixing batches in my big storage bin, adding just enough coloring to give it that distinctive pink tint, then repackaging it into the original bags. By the time I was done, my garage looked like a drug lab, but for ice melt instead of methamphetamine. The bags were stacked neatly, each one sealed and labeled with a printed sticker I had made that said Sullivan's Professional Ice Melt Formula. I even designed a logo, a snowflake with a lightning bolt through it. I was committed to the bit. Brenda came by with a check from the HOA and 3 other board members to help load the bags into their cars. Linda and Patricia were there, along with a guy named Richard, who I had seen at the last meeting. "Jake, this is wonderful," Linda said as she loaded bags into her trunk. "You're really helping the community." Just doing my part, I said, trying to keep a straight face. Patricia held up one of the bags, examining it closely. What exactly is in this formula? I have a dog, and I need to make sure it's pet safe. It's completely pet safe, I assured her, which was true since it was just salt and food coloring. All the ingredients are non-toxic. But what are the ingredients? She pressed. That's proprietary information, Brenda interjected. Jake has been kind enough to provide us with the product without revealing his trade secrets. We should respect that. I almost felt bad about how enthusiastically Brenda was defending my fictional formula. They loaded up all 40 bags and drove away. I went inside, deposited the HOA check in my bank account via mobile app, and poured myself a bourbon. I had just made $1,800, minus expenses. I was up about $1,500 for a week's work of mixing salt with food coloring. Over the next few days, the neighborhood transformed. Everyone was using my pink salt, and everyone's driveway looked immaculate. People were stopping each other on the street to rave about how well it worked. I heard conversations at the mailbox about how it was revolutionary and the best ice melt ever. The irony was not lost on me. It was working great because people were finally using enough salt. Before, they had been buying expensive ice melt products and using them sparingly to make them last. Now, they were buying my cheap salt at premium prices and using generous amounts because they thought it was special. The psychology of it was fascinating. I thought that would be the end of it. I had made my money, proven my point, and everyone's driveways were safe. But of course, Brenda was not done. 2 weeks later, she called another HOA meeting. Mandatory attendance for all residents. The email said it was regarding an exciting new business opportunity for Pine Ridge Estates. I had a bad feeling about this. The community center was packed. Every single resident seemed to be there. Brenda stood at the front with a whiteboard behind her that had bullet points and charts. She had prepared a full presentation. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "I've called this meeting because I believe we have an opportunity to turn our community into something special. As you all know, Jake Sullivan's ice melt formula has been a game changer for our neighborhood. In just 2 weeks, we've seen a dramatic improvement in safety, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive." People nodded and murmured agreement. I sank lower in my chair. What you may not know is that this product is completely unique. I've done research, and there's nothing like it on the market. I believe we have an opportunity to turn this into a profitable business venture for our entire community. Oh no, she was serious. "I've spoken with a patent attorney," Brenda continued. "And while Jake understandably wants to keep his formula secret, we can still market and distribute the product under a community brand. Pine Ridge Ice Melt. We could sell it to other HOAs, to businesses, maybe even get it into retail stores. The profit potential is enormous." Richard raised his hand. "What kind of investment are we talking about?" I've crunched the numbers. If each household invested $2,000, we could set up a proper production facility, get bulk packaging materials, hire a marketing firm, and launch a regional distribution network. With 76 households in Pine Ridge Estates, that's $152,000 in startup capital. People were actually considering this. I could see them mentally calculating their potential returns. "And Jake," Brenda turned to me with a smile that made my blood run cold. "We'd need you as a partner, of course. You'd be the chief product officer. We'd pay you a salary plus a percentage of profits. All you'd have to do is produce the formula in larger quantities." Every head in the room turned to look at me. I felt like I was going to throw up. "Brenda, I don't think that's a good idea," I said carefully. "Why not? This could make everyone in this community very wealthy." "Because it's just salt," I blurted out. The room went silent. "Excuse me," Brenda said. I stood up. I had to come clean. This had gone way too far. "Brenda, everyone, I need to be honest. There is no special formula. It's regular rock salt from Home Depot. I just added food coloring to make it look different." You could have heard a pin drop. Brenda's face went through several shades of red before settling on purple. "You're joking." "I'm not joking. It's Morton Safe tea salt, $6 a bag. The only reason it works so well is because people are finally using enough of it instead of sprinkling it sparingly." Linda stood up, her voice shaking. "You charged us $50 a bag for regular salt." "45, I corrected, which in retrospect was not the right thing to say. "You scammed the HOA, Patricia shouted. "That's fraud. Actually, it's not," I said, pulling out my phone. "I never claimed it had special properties. I never lied about the ingredients. I just sold you salt at a premium price. That's called capitalism." Tom was trying very hard not to laugh in the corner. Brenda looked like she might actually attack me. "You purposely deceived this community," she yelled. "You're going to refund every penny or I'll sue you personally and on behalf of the HOA. For what? Selling you a product that works exactly as advertised. Everyone's driveways are clear, aren't they? Nobody slipped and fell. The product did exactly what you wanted it to do. You manipulated me." "No, Brenda. You manipulated yourself. You refused to believe that I was using regular salt. You insisted there had to be a secret formula. You offered to pay me premium prices. I just provided the product you demanded." A man I recognized as Steve, who lived on the next street over, stood up. "Hold on. Is he right? Does the pink salt actually work the same as regular salt?" "Yes," I said. "I can show you the original bags from Home Depot if you want proof." "So we've all been spending $50 for $6 salt." "Technically, $45, I said again, and immediately regretted it. The room erupted. People were shouting, some at me, some at Brenda, some at each other. A few people were demanding refunds. Others were arguing that since the product worked, they did not care. Tom was openly laughing now. Brenda banged her hand on the table. "Order! Everyone, please." The room gradually quieted down. "Jake Sullivan, the HOA board will be discussing potential disciplinary action and legal remedies. In the meantime, you are to cease all sales of this product immediately." "Already done," I said. "I never wanted to be in the ice melt business anyway." I left the meeting with people glaring at me. My phone started buzzing with texts and calls before I even got back to my house. Most of them were angry residents demanding refunds. A few, surprisingly, were people saying they thought the whole thing was hilarious and that Brenda had it coming. Tom called me as soon as I walked in my door. "Dude, that was incredible," he said, still laughing. "I can't believe you actually did that." "It got way out of hand," I admitted. "I just wanted to mess with Brenda a little bit. I didn't think she'd try to turn it into a business." "Are you worried about legal trouble?" "I talked to a lawyer friend before the meeting," I said. "He looked over what I actually said and did. I never made false claims about the product. I never said it had special chemicals or ingredients. I just charged a high price for a regular product and let Brenda's assumptions do the rest. It's not illegal to overcharge for something as long as you're not lying about what it is." "What about the food coloring? That's just cosmetic." "Lots of products have coloring added. It doesn't change the functionality." Over the next few days, the neighborhood split into factions. About half the residents thought I was a con artist who should be kicked out of the HOA. The other half thought Brenda had gotten what she deserved for being so controlling and invasive. It was the most drama Pine Ridge Estates had seen in years. Brenda, predictably, escalated things. She sent me an official letter from the HOA threatening to fine me for conduct unbecoming of a community member and violations of good faith and trust. I responded with a letter from my lawyer explaining that the HOA had no legal authority to fine me for a private business transaction, and that any attempts to do so would result in a countersuit for harassment. Then Brenda made her biggest mistake. She filed a police report claiming I had defrauded the HOA. 2 officers showed up at my door on a Tuesday evening. Officer Martinez and Officer Chen were professional and polite, but they explained they had to investigate the complaint. "Mr. Sullivan, can you explain the nature of your business relationship with the HOA?" Officer Martinez asked. I walked them through the entire story, from Brenda's initial demands to know my secret formula, to the food coloring scheme to her attempt to start a business. I showed them the text messages, emails, and my receipts from Home Depot. I showed them the original Morton Safe tea salt bags. I even showed them my conversation with my lawyer. "Did you ever claim the product was anything other than salt?" Officer Chen asked. "No. I called it a formula, but I never specified what was in the formula. When asked directly about ingredients, I said it was proprietary, which isn't a lie. My specific mixture ratio and the food coloring are technically proprietary." The officers exchanged a glance. "And the HOA agreed to pay these prices voluntarily?" Officer Martinez asked. "Yes. Mrs. Morrison offered $1,000 just for the formula. I countered with the offer to sell the prepared product instead. She negotiated the bulk price herself." Officer Chen closed his notebook. "Mr. Sullivan, I don't see any criminal activity here. This appears to be a civil matter at most. You sold a product at an agreed-upon price, and that product functioned as expected. The fact that the buyer later felt the price was too high doesn't constitute fraud." "So no charges?" I asked. "No charges," Officer Martinez confirmed. "Though I'd recommend you refund the money if possible, just to keep the peace in your neighborhood." After they left, I felt vindicated but also exhausted. This whole situation had become absurd. That night I got a knock on my door. It was Linda from the HOA board, but she was alone. "Jake, can we talk?" she asked. Off the record, I let her in and made coffee. We sat at my kitchen table. "I owe you an apology," Linda said. "I've been on the board with Brenda for 3 years, and I've watched her bully people over the stupidest things. Your mailbox, your grass height, the color of your front door. She's made life miserable for a lot of people in this neighborhood." "Okay," I said, not sure where this was going. "The salt thing, it was funny at first. But then when I thought about it, I realized what you actually proved. You proved that Brenda's need to control everything and to be right about everything made her completely irrational. She couldn't accept the simple answer, so she invented a complex conspiracy in her head." "That's basically what happened," I agreed. "Half the board wants to remove her as president," Linda continued. "Patricia and I have been documenting her behavior for months. This ice melt situation might be the final straw we need. But we need to know if you're willing to refund the HOA's money. Not because you have to, but because it would help us make the case that you were never trying to actually defraud anyone, and that Brenda's response was disproportionate." I thought about it. $1,500 was a lot of money to give back, but it would also end this nightmare. "If you can get Brenda removed as HOA president, I'll refund the entire amount," I said. Linda smiled. "Deal. Give us 2 weeks." She was true to her word. At the next board meeting, which I was not required to attend but heard about through Tom, Linda and Patricia presented a motion of no confidence in Brenda's leadership. They cited multiple instances of harassment, abuse of power, and the mishandling of HOA funds in the ice melt situation. Richard, the fourth board member, sided with them. The vote was 3-1. Brenda was removed as HOA president. Linda was elected as the new president, and one of her first acts was to accept my refund of the $1,800 and close the matter officially. I wrote the check, and honestly, it felt good. I had made my point. Brenda had been deposed and the neighborhood could go back to normal, but the story does not end there. About a week after I issued the refund, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. "Is this Jake Sullivan?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Rebecca Chen. I'm a producer for a podcast called Suburban Warfare. We cover interesting HOA disputes and neighborhood drama. I heard about your situation through a friend who lives in Pine Ridge Estates, and I think our listeners would love to hear this story. Would you be interested in being interviewed?" I laughed. "You want to do a podcast about ice melt and HOA drama?" Our most popular episode was about a guy who got fined for having the wrong shade of beige on his house. Trust me, people love this stuff. Plus, your story has everything: overreach, deception, a dramatic reveal, and a resolution. It's perfect. I don't know, things are just calming down here. We'd pay you for your time. Standard guest fee is $500. I thought about the money I had just refunded. You know what? Sure, why not? The podcast episode aired 3 weeks later. Rebecca did a great job telling the story, interviewing me, Tom, and even Linda. She tried to get Brenda to participate, but Brenda refused. The episode went viral within the HOA and neighborhood drama community, which apparently was a real thing with a dedicated audience. Suddenly, I was getting messages from people all over the country sharing their own HOA horror stories. News websites picked up the story. A local Chicago news station even did a segment about it. The attention died down after a few weeks, but it had lasting effects. The HOA board, now led by Linda, implemented new policies to prevent abuse of power. They set up an anonymous complaint system so residents could report board members who overstepped. They even reduced some of the more ridiculous rules, like the exact height requirements for grass. Brenda moved out of Pine Ridge Estates about 2 months later. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she bought a condo in downtown Naperville where there was no HOA to run. I hoped, for the sake of her new neighbors, that she had learned something from this experience, but I doubted it. As for me, life went back to normal. I continued to use my regular $6 bags of rock salt, and my driveway stayed clear all winter. Other neighbors started buying the cheap stuff in bulk and using it generously, and everyone's driveways looked great. Funny how that worked. Tom and I became better friends through the whole ordeal. We started having beers on Friday nights, and he never let me live down the "it's just salt" reveal at the meeting. "You know what the best part is?" he said one evening as we sat on my porch watching the snow fall. "You accidentally taught the whole neighborhood a lesson about questioning authority and not assuming expensive means better." "I was mostly just messing with Brenda," I admitted. "Yeah, but you stumbled into something bigger. How many people in this neighborhood were buying overpriced products because they assumed cheap stuff wouldn't work? How many of them let Brenda push them around because she acted like she had authority? You showed everyone that the emperor has no clothes, except with ice melt instead of clothes." That's very philosophical for a guy on his 4th beer. "I'm just saying, you're like a folk hero now. The guy who stood up to the HOA with rock salt and food coloring." I laughed, but he was kind of right. People treated me differently now. They waved when they saw me. They asked my opinion at HOA meetings, which I actually started attending occasionally. I had somehow become a voice of reason in the neighborhood, which was ironic considering the whole thing started as a petty prank. The following spring, Linda approached me about joining the HOA board. There was an opening after Brenda left, and they needed someone who understood the community and was not afraid to push back against bad ideas. I was hesitant at first. The whole point of my quiet suburban life was to avoid drama, not seek it out. But Linda convinced me that having someone on the board who remembered the Brenda era would help prevent it from happening again. I accepted, and my first act as a board member was to propose eliminating the rule about mailbox placement, the same rule Brenda had tried to use against me years ago. It passed unanimously. Over the next few months, we streamlined the HOA rules, cutting out about 40% of the regulations that served no real purpose other than giving the board power over residents. We implemented term limits for board positions. We made the budget transparent and posted it online where anyone could review it. Pine Ridge Estates became a pretty great place to live once we got rid of the authoritarian nonsense. People actually talk to each other now. Instead of being afraid, they'd be reported for some minor infraction. Kids played in the streets. Neighbors helped each other with yard work and snow removal. The ice melt incident became neighborhood legend. New residents who moved in would eventually hear the story from someone, usually embellished with details that had not actually happened. In some versions, I had sold Brenda actual dirt and convinced her it was ice melt. In others, I had made hundreds of thousands of dollars. The truth was mundane compared to the myths, but I never corrected anyone. Let them have their fun. One winter evening, about a year after the whole incident, I was spreading salt on my driveway after a fresh snowfall. A car pulled up and a woman I did not recognize got out. She was maybe late 20s, wearing a business suit under her winter coat. "Jake Sullivan?" she asked. "That's me." "I'm Jennifer Park. I'm a marketing executive with a company called Home Guard. We manufacture home maintenance products. I heard about your situation last year with the HOA, and I wanted to talk to you about a potential opportunity." I leaned on my shovel. "What kind of opportunity?" "We're launching a new line of ice melt products, and we want to market them as no-nonsense, effective, affordable solutions. Kind of an anti-premium approach. We think your story embodies that philosophy perfectly. We'd like you to be a spokesperson." I started laughing. "You want me to be the face of cheap ice melt. We prefer to call it reasonably priced ice melt. But yes, we'd film some commercials, maybe do some print ads. The tagline would be something like Jake Sullivan knows the secret to clear driveways. Use enough ice melt. We'd pay you, of course. $50,000 for a one-year contract. $50,000 to talk about ice melt in commercials. It was absurd. It was also more money than I had ever made from a side project. Can I think about it? Of course. Here's my card. Let me know by the end of the week. I went inside and called Tom immediately. "Dude, you have to do it," he said after I explained the offer. "This is hilarious. You'll be the ice melt guy." "That's exactly why I'm not sure about it. Do I want to be known as the ice melt guy? For 50 grand? Hell yes, you do. Besides, it's a good message. Use enough product for it to actually work instead of trying to make expensive stuff last forever. That's practical advice." He was right. I called Jennifer back the next day and accepted. The commercials filmed in February. They were deliberately tongue-in-cheek, with me playing up the regular guy who accidentally became an ice melt expert angle. The spots showed me applying ice melt to my driveway while explaining that the secret was not some magic formula, but simply using adequate amounts of a basic, effective product. "Don't be fooled by expensive gimmicks," I said to the camera. "Sometimes the best solution is the simplest one." The commercials ran regionally in the Midwest that winter and got a surprising amount of attention. People recognized me at the grocery store. The podcast episode got a surge of new listeners. HomeGuard sold out of their basic ice melt products in 3 states. I banked the $50,000, paid off my car, and put the rest into savings. The whole experience had gone from annoying to profitable in ways I never could have predicted. Tom threw me a party when the commercial aired, inviting half the neighborhood. Even Linda came, bringing a cake decorated with pink salt crystals made from frosting and food coloring. To Jake, Tom toasted, raising his beer, who proved that sometimes pettiness pays off. Everyone laughed and drank. It was a good moment. As the party wound down and people headed home through the snowy streets, Tom and I sat on my porch again, our usual spot for these conversations. "You know what's weird?" I said. "None of this would have happened if Brenda had just believed me when I said it was regular salt." "That's the thing about people like her," Tom replied. "They can't accept simple answers. Everything has to be complicated. Everything has to be a conspiracy or a secret. It makes them feel smart to think they're uncovering something others missed." I guess I exploited that. "You gave her exactly what she asked for. That's not exploitation, that's just good business." I thought about that. Maybe he was right. Brenda had demanded a special formula, and I had provided one. The fact that it was psychologically special rather than chemically special was not my fault. The snow continued to fall, coating the street in fresh white powder. Tomorrow, I would spread my $6 rock salt on the driveway, and it would work perfectly, just like it always had. No magic, no secrets, just basic chemistry and adequate application. But somewhere out there, probably in her downtown condo, Brenda was maybe spreading expensive ice melt sparingly, wondering why it was not working as well as it should, never quite making the connection that the problem was not the product but the method. Some people never learn, and honestly, that was fine with me. Their stubbornness had bought me a new car and a great story to tell. Tom stood up, stretching. "I should get home before my driveway becomes a skating rink." "Same time next Friday." "Absolutely. I'll supply the beer. Just don't try to sell me a premium formula for it, please." I've learned my lesson. Sometimes the store brand is exactly as good as people think the expensive stuff is. He laughed and headed down my driveway, carefully avoiding the patches I had not salted yet. I watched him cross the street to his house, and then I looked around the neighborhood. Warm light glowed from living room windows. Smoke curled from chimneys. It was peaceful, quiet, normal. This was what I had wanted when I moved here 3 years ago. It had taken a ridiculous conflict over ice melt and a petty scheme to get here, but somehow it had worked out. I finished my beer and went inside, locking the door behind me. Tomorrow, I would wake up, go to my software engineering job, come home, and maybe spread some salt if it snowed. No HOA drama, no schemes, no commercials to film, just regular life in a regular neighborhood, where the most exciting thing that happened was when someone figured out that expensive products were not always better than cheap ones, and that sometimes the real secret was just using common sense. And if that made me the ice melt guy, well, I had been called worse things. The end of that winter marked a turning point for Pine Ridge Estates. The neighborhood had weathered not just the harsh Illinois cold, but also a fundamental shift in how the community operated. Without Brenda's iron grip on the HOA, people relaxed. They painted their doors colors they actually liked. They planted gardens without submitting detailed landscaping plans. They lived their lives without constantly looking over their shoulders for violation notices. I served on the HOA board for 2 years before deciding I had done my part and stepping down. In that time, we reduced the annual HOA fees by 30% by cutting unnecessary expenditures like the community beautification consultant Brenda had hired, who turned out to be her cousin, charging $2,000 a month to occasionally trim some hedges. We put the money saved into actually useful things like playground equipment and better street lighting. The ice melt story faded into comfortable legend, something people brought up at neighborhood barbecues with a laugh and a shake of their heads. New residents heard the tale and appreciated that they had moved into a community that had learned to question authority and think critically. As for me, I went back to being just another guy in the neighborhood. The commercial money was nice, and Home Guard even asked me to do another campaign the following year, which I politely declined. Once was funny, twice would have been overkill. I never saw Brenda again after she moved out, though I heard through mutual connections that she had tried to get elected to her condo association board and was rejected overwhelmingly. Apparently, her reputation had preceded her. Tom remained my closest friend in the neighborhood. We still had our Friday night beers, and we still laughed about the ice melt incident, though the story had been told so many times it had become comfortable background noise. 3 winters after the original incident, I was spreading salt on my driveway, regular Morton Safe tea salt from Home Depot, $6 a bag, when a young couple walking by stopped to watch. "Excuse me," the woman said. "Are you Jake Sullivan, the ice melt guy?" I suppressed a smile. "Guilty." "We just moved in down the street," the man said. "We heard the story about what you did with the HOA. That's hilarious." "It was a weird time," I admitted. "So, is it true?" the woman asked. "Was it really just regular salt?" "Really just regular salt," I confirmed, holding up the bag to show them. They laughed, thanked me, and continued their walk. I finished salting my driveway and stood there for a moment, looking at my handiwork. The salt crystals sparkled in the winter sun, already beginning to melt the thin layer of ice underneath. It occurred to me that this whole experience had taught me something important, though it had taken me a while to fully understand it. The lesson was not just about standing up to busybody HOA presidents, or about the psychology of perceived value. It was about the importance of simplicity in a world that constantly tried to convince you that simple solutions were not good enough. Brenda had been so sure that there had to be a secret, a trick, a special formula, because she could not accept that the answer to her problem was straightforward and inexpensive. She was not unique in that. How many people paid extra for products with fancy packaging and marketing when the generic version was identical? How many people made their lives more complicated than they needed to be because they did not trust simple solutions? I had stumbled into exposing that tendency, and while my methods had been questionable, the result had been positive. People in my neighborhood thought more carefully now about what they bought and why. They questioned whether rules made sense before following them. They did not automatically defer to authority just because someone had a title. That was worth more than the $1,800 I had made and refunded, more than the $50,000 from the commercial, more than the brief internet fame. I picked up my snow shovel and bag of salt and headed back into my garage. Through my kitchen window, I could see the neighborhood going about its day. Kids building a snowman 3 houses down, a couple walking their dog. Someone else spreading salt on their driveway, probably the same cheap stuff I used. It was ordinary, unremarkable, and exactly what I had wanted when I moved here. The ice had melted in more ways than one, and life in Pine Ridge Estates was better for it. Sometimes the best revenge is not elaborate or dramatic. Sometimes it is just proving that you were right all along, that the simple answer was the correct one, and that the emperor really was not wearing any clothes. And sometimes, if you are lucky, that revenge comes with a side of community improvement and a funny story to tell at parties. I made myself a sandwich, settled onto my couch, and turned on a basketball game. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and I knew that tomorrow I would be out there again with my $6 salt, keeping my driveway clear, living my quiet suburban life. No drama, no schemes, no HOA presidents demanding secrets that did not exist. Just me, my rock salt, and a neighborhood that had finally learned to appreciate the value of simplicity. And honestly, that was more than enough.